Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I've also started recording it. Hopefully that has. Yes, I think it has started. Okay, so again, as I said, that this will be the last lecture of this course for this semester. And today what we are going to do is talk about genetic engineering. And you will see that genetic engineering is sort of the application of what we have done so far, what we have learned so far in biology. We have already seen quite a few applications, but this topic is mostly about applying whatever knowledge we have learned, whether it is molecular biology or cell biology or immunology. Okay, so one example is shown here. This is something that is very commercial, that you can buy this glowfish, right? So this is called a zebrafish. It's you can put it in your aquarium, small aquarium, but you can also buy zebrafish which are genetically modified, so that if you turn off the light, they will glow in the dark. So some will glow red, some will glow yellow, some will glow green. So what has been done in case of this particular fish is that a particular gene has been edited. So that gene has been added to the genome of this fish. So that gene encodes for a particular protein called fluorescent protein. Okay, and this protein comes in different flavors. So you can get green fluorescent protein, yellow fluorescent protein, red fluorescent protein. So whichever gene you encode, that particular fish will glow in that color in the dark. Right. So how do we do that, or what do we exactly mean by genetic engineering? So as the name suggests, that we are doing something at the genetic level, right? So what we have learned in this course is that information flows from DNA to RNA to protein. DNA are the molecules which encode information, right? And proteins are the molecules which do all the hard work. So proteins are like nanomachines. They perform all the tasks that happens inside any organism, be it a virus like the coronavirus or be it us. Okay, all the functions are being carried out by proteins. When coronavirus infects us, it is invading our cells. It is actually the protein on the surface of the coronavirus, which is a spike protein, that is invading us. And in fact, this genetic engineering is what is being used to create all these vaccines that are coming up in the market. So what people are doing is they are encoding the, so we have sequenced the spike protein. We know what is its DNA sequence. We are mimicking that sequence. We are producing either the messenger RNA or the protein itself, which we are introducing, injecting in our body, so that our body will make B cells and T cells against that particular virus. So next time when the actual virus comes, our body will be ready to kill it, right? So that is also genetic engineering. So genetic engineering can be manipulation of an organism's genome, like we saw in the previous slide. We are manipulating the genome of this fish to make it glow in the dark. It can range from changing just one base pair to deleting a whole region of DNA or adding something into the DNA, right? So what we do is we extract DNA from one organism's genome and combine it with the DNA of another organism. So all of these are done to enhance or modify certain characteristics in an individual organism. In case of the glowfish, fish don't glow in dark, right? But we have added this extra characteristic to this particular fish by adding the genes for this type of proteins, which are fluorescent proteins. So these are some examples of genetically modified organisms that we actually use in our day-to-day life. So for example, BT cotton. Okay, so BT cotton is, most of the cotton that we use, 95% of the cotton that we use is actually BT cotton. So this BT stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. It is actually a bacteria. right? So normally what happens is that cotton plant, it is very vulnerable to certain attacks by pests and other organisms, right? And that causes a huge loss to the cotton farmers. So a particular company, what they did was they found that this particular bacteria encodes for a protein, which, so it encodes a gene. That gene, when translated to the protein, that protein is toxic to this particular pests which attack the cotton plant, right? So what they did was they took that gene and they added it using genetic engineering to the cotton plant. So the cotton plant will now make this toxin in its stem, in its leaves. So when this pest comes and tries to eat the plant, that pest will die. Okay, so it actually saves the plant. It is not harming the plant, but it is protecting the plant from attack these pests. So BT cotton quickly became very popular, and it is one of the most widespread cottons that is being used. Similarly, there are this genetically modified sweet corn, which are actually much more sweet and juicy compared to your normal corn that is being found, right? Again, in case of poultry, dairy farming, we see applications of genetically modified. So in this case, what is done is hormones are injected to cows and poultry so that they give more milk or they produce more egg. Now these hormones are nothing but small peptides, which are actually produced using genetic engineering. So those are produced in mass scales and then they are used in these industries. Okay. Another very interesting example is this particular bacteria, Pseudomonas putida. So it's famously known as the oil-eating bacteria. So anyone knows, anyone has heard this name? So there is an Indian scientist who is actually involved in the discovery of this particular bacteria. No one has heard of oil-eating bacteria? So it is actually quite widely used whenever you have these oil spills in the ocean. One of the techniques to remove that oil spill is to add this bacteria so that it will chew up the oil and cause minimal damage to the environment. So no one has heard of Pseudomonas putida?
No, sir.
No? Okay. So okay,
No,
then
sir.
maybe this is something new you will learn. So this was actually discovered by Anandamohan Chakraborty, right? So again, not in India, he was working in US, and this was in early 1980s. So he discovered this and he modified that bacteria, but not using the standard genetic engineering techniques that I am going to talk about today, because that was way back in time, like 40 years back. So he used different way of mutating the bacteria, right? So I'm not going to go into that. And he filed for patent for this particular organism. And of course, the patent was rejected because you cannot patent any living organism, right? So then later on, a Supreme Court case was filed, and that is the famous Diamond versus Chakraborty case. And ultimately, Professor Chakraborty, he won the case because this is a bacteria which is not naturally found. It is something that he has created in the lab. So he had every right on that. So ultimately he won. That was the first patent that was awarded to a living organism. And now there are different versions of that bacteria which are being used currently by the oil industry. Another very important application of genetic engineering is the production of human insulin. So insulin is something that is used to regulate, or insulin is actually a natural hormone that is found in our body, and its function is to regulate the blood sugar level. Okay, so I'll talk about human insulin in more details. So these are again some more examples. So this is tomato that we eat, right? So we put it in our food, whether in salad or in sabji. So the wild type tomatoes that come, those tomatoes actually go bad very quickly because the skin gets ripe, and when the skin gets ripe, the tomato skin is once it is ripe, it becomes very soft. So bacteria, fungi, they can attack and destroy the tomato. Okay, so to prevent that, what people would do in early days was they would pluck this tomato when it is green. Okay, and you cannot ship a ripe tomato, so you have to pluck it when it is green and ship it. But then when it comes into the market, no one will buy green tomatoes, so you have to ripen it, and that was done using certain chemicals. A very common chemical to ripen tomato, or let's say this is the season of mango now, you will see that people are ripening these mangoes using acetylene, right? But you can see if you get a properly ripened mango from a tree, or if you get a ripened mango using these chemicals, the tastes are completely different. Okay, so that's the same case for tomato also. So these artificially ripened tomatoes were not very good in taste. So this particular company, it was in California, they figured out that there is a particular enzyme that is involved in ripening the tomato. Okay, so if you inhibit that enzyme, you can, or inhibit the enzyme meaning stop the enzyme from doing its work. Enzyme is a protein. If you can stop that enzyme, your tomato will not get ripe very quickly. Okay, so this red tomato will stay like that for much longer period of time. Instead of going bad in one day, maybe it will go bad in 1 week or 2 weeks. So that tomato was called flavor saver, because you can actually pluck the tomato which are ripened on the plant, and then it is still hard. You can actually ship it, people will buy it, and it will still stay better. And then of course more modifications have been done on that, which gives us the modern tomato. So you can actually buy it from your market and keep it outside for a few days without it going bad. And I have already talked to you about this glowfish, which is a zebrafish, which has this green fluorescent protein or other fluorescent proteins encoded in its DNA. So I said that insulin is a hormone, right? It's actually a very important hormone. And there is this particular disease called diabetes. It's very common. So heart disease, diabetes, these are two most common diseases in the world now, right? So what happens in diabetes is that when we eat something, the blood glucose level goes up, but that increased glucose level is not good for us, right? It has to be immediately imported into the cells and digested. So glucose is a very high energy molecule. When you digest it, you get a lot of energy. But if it stays in your blood and it is not getting digested, then it is of no use. It is actually harmful. The hormone that does that is actually insulin. We have studied protein, so you can look at this and you can tell that it is actually a protein. So this is the N terminus of the protein, and this is the C terminus of the protein. So that's the polypeptide chain. And what you can see is that this particular peptide, polypeptide, has 3 regions. Yeah, is there a question? Okay, so it has several regions. One is this signal sequence. Then there is this particular part which is called the B chain. Then there is the C chain and the A chain. So A, B, C, and the signal sequence. So insulin is synthesized like this. After synthesis, the signal part goes out. So this whole thing is called the pre-pro insulin. When the signal sequence goes out, so this signal sequence is important for secretion of the insulin from the cell. It is getting synthesized inside some cells. Okay, but it has to be secreted out into the blood. So that secretion is done because of this signal sequence. So once it is secreted, it is chopped off. You don't need it. Now you are left with this, but this is also not the mature insulin. This is called the proinsulin. Two more cuts are made, one cut here and another cut here, so that this C chain or the C peptide goes out, and you are left with the A and the B part, right? So you can see that this is one peptide and this is another peptide. Now these two peptides are held together by disulfide linkages, right? So we have seen something like this before. Any idea where you have seen two different peptide chains held together by disulfide linkages?
Structures.
Huh?
So like when we like studied the folding up of proteins.
So Affinson's experiment, right?
Yeah.
RNase A, but that was the same polypeptide chain. Okay, so in case of RNase A, it is the same polypeptide chain which has eight cysteines, so 4 disulfide linkages. But I'm asking you that two different polypeptide chains held together by disulfide linkages. You have seen something like that. Immunology, have you seen something like this in immunology lecture?
The antibody?
Yes, antibody, right? So it has this Y shape, right? So the antibody, it has 4 chains, and those 4 chains are held together by disulfide linkages. Okay, so you can go check it back, but that is another example, and this is another example. So disulfide linkages are actually very useful in situations like this. So now this is your mature insulin. Okay. So this is called a hormone because it's synthesized somewhere, but it is transported to far locations for its action. Okay, so that is the definition of hormone, something that goes far and does it work. So hormones, they are synthesized in this particular type of glands called the pancreas. Okay, so in the pancreas, a particular cell called islet of Langerhans, they are synthesized in those cells, then they are secreted out into the blood. So these cells continuously release a small amount of insulin into the body, but this small amount increases when there is a rise in the blood glucose level. So suppose I have my lunch, okay, so then that lunch is digested and my blood glucose level will increase. Now to quickly metabolize that glucose, insulin will be produced. So every time a person eats, the blood glucose rises, so that now more insulin, that will trigger release of more insulin. And this insulin, what it will do is it will help the transport of glucose into the cells. So insulin is produced here, it will go and bind to insulin receptor. So these are cells in our body, different places. Okay, so they have this insulin receptor. Insulin will go and bind, and it will activate the glucose transporter. So glucose is outside in the blood. It will start getting transported into the cell. Right. So that is the function of insulin. So this is what happens in a normal body. But in case of diabetes, so there are two types of diabetes. One is type 1 diabetes, the other one is type 2 diabetes, right? So in type 1 diabetes, the body stops making insulin. And in type 2 diabetes, it produces insulin, which is also in less amount, but it is not able to bind the receptors properly. Okay, so these are different ways of in which the insulin can stop working, and if the insulin is not working, then of course the blood glucose level will go haywire, which is not very good for our health. So how does insulin help? So we have already seen the cellular architecture, right? So this is our cell. This will be the plasma membrane, right? So if you can think of it as typically any cell, this plasma membrane, across this plasma membrane, you have the insulin receptor and the glucose receptors. So that's the plasma membrane, right? On the plasma membrane, you have these insulin receptors. So when glucose level is high, pancreas will produce more insulin. Those insulin will float and start binding different insulin receptors on different cells. So once it binds, it triggers a reaction. So this reaction is phosphorylation, right? We have not seen most probably this in any example, but this is actually a very common occurrence that happens in biology. So whenever you are trying to send a signal, a very good way of sending signal is phosphorylating, right? So there are certain amino acids. So this is a protein. There are certain amino acids which have OH group in their side chain, and those amino acids can be easily phosphorylated. So for example, serine, threonine, tyrosine, they can be easily phosphorylated. So those residues get phosphorylated. Once they get phosphorylated, they will start interacting with other proteins which is inside the cytoplasm. So you can see insulin binds here, that causes certain change in the structure, which results in phosphorylation. They will start binding some proteins. So this is a chain of events that happens. Okay, these are actually very complicated events. Okay. So this chain of events happen. Now there are these glucose receptors which are sequestered in small vesicles like this. So they are not on the surface. Okay, they are just outside. Sorry, they are just inside the cytoplasm. So these are small vesicles. Once this chain of event happens, this vesicle will go and fuse with the membrane and insert this glucose receptors or glucose channels into the plasma membrane. So these are like doors, okay, but these are very specific doors. They will only allow glucose to pass through them. So insulin will trigger this, multiple such glucose receptors will go and bind here, and all the glucose in the blood will start rushing in. Okay, so and then it will get metabolized inside the cell, which will produce energy that we will use to do different work. So insulin is actually a very important molecule, and as we saw that if the amount of insulin goes down, it causes serious problem called diabetes. So in so this is exactly 100 years from now, 100 years back from now. So in those days, no one knew much about this, right? And diabetes was a very severe disease. So there is, so diabetes can also be a genetic disease where children who are born with defective pancreatic cells, they are not able to produce much insulin. So in those days, those kids would not live long. They will die at a very young age. So Frederick Banting and Charles Best, these were two doctors in Canada. They were working on this particular problem. And what Frederick Banting and Charles Best, what they figured out is that it is actually insulin which controls the glucose level. So to test that, they purified insulin from dog's pancreas. Now it turns out that insulin is a highly conserved molecule. Highly conserved means that if you take the protein sequence or the peptide sequence of insulin from a dog or a horse and us, and if you compare them, so it is around 80 amino acids, you will see that maybe 1 or 2 amino acids are different. Everything else is the same. So 95% of the sequence is exactly the same, which means that if you take insulin from a dog's pancreas and inject it into a human, there is a very good chance that it will work. Right? So that is exactly what they did. They extracted insulin from dog pancreas and then they injected it into these sick kids who were almost on the verge of dying. And what happened is that after injecting insulin within few hours, these kids who were like looking as if they are almost going to die, they stood up, they actually sat up, and then within a few days they were released from the hospital perfectly healthy. Right. So that was actually a miracle discovery. Right. But then the problem is that you have to extract insulin from some animal. First of all, you have to kill that animal. The second thing is that even after that, you will not get much. Right. So that was a big problem. In 1980, genetic engineering was used to produce insulin in bacteria. So we can grow bacteria in large amount. We can actually use big fermenters to grow bacteria, right? And then we can purify insulin from there. So that was done in the 1980s. In 1982, Eli Lilly, they got the first human insulin approved by FDA. So it was then marketed, right? And that is something that is very common now. So in India, Biocon is a company in Bangalore. Again, I don't know if any one of you have heard of its name. So Biocon is something that produces insulin, right? So that is one of their major products. Biocon is one of the biggest, largest insulin producers all over the world. So now we can produce insulin in bacteria or yeast. So Biocon actually uses yeast. You can make it in large quantity, and we are not making insulin which is similar to dog's insulin. We are actually making insulin which is the human insulin. And since you are making it in bacteria and purifying it, it is highly pure, no side effects, and you can give it to patients and they can live almost close to normal healthy life. Okay. So diabetes has become something that can be very well managed these days. And of course, since we are making it in bacteria and in large quantity, the cost of insulin has gone down drastically. So the question is, how do you do that? How do we make insulin? So a protein which is supposed to be made by human cells, how are we making it in bacteria and in large quantity? So yeah, so the answer is genetic engineering. Okay, any questions up to this point?
Sir, you told about the, tomato, that, it will keep it fresh till many days. So I am just asking there whether there is any side effect in it or not, because sometimes we hear that due to various reasons, we are getting the foods which are not healthy. I hear sometimes.
Right. Yes. So the problem with most of the things which we hear is contamination. Okay. Like you are getting milk, your milkman is adding water to that milk, and that water might not be very clean water. Okay. So those are the so impurities, contaminations, those are the problems. But this is not that. This is different. In this case, what we are doing is, or we means what people have done is that they have reduce the production of a particular enzyme. So again, you are not adding anything, you are actually removing something. Okay, so that is the safest thing to do. When you add something, you think that, okay, maybe what this will do, but here something was already present which you are reducing. So the tomato will not go ripe very quickly. Right? And this tomato, we are eating this tomato for last 20-30 years, right? So there are no reported effects of that. Actually, any vegetable, any fruit, anything that you eat, most of these are genetically modified. Like for example, banana. Okay. I don't know how many of you have eaten wild banana. Anyone has eaten wild banana? Okay, let me put it in a different way. Have you eaten apple? Do you find seeds inside apple? Do you find seeds inside apple?
Yes, sir.
Do you find seeds inside tomato? Do you find
Yes,
seeds
sir.
inside orange? Right. So
Yes.
any fruit you think, watermelon, you will find seeds, right? What about banana? Do you find seeds
sir.
inside banana?
No.
No, sir.
No, right? If any one of you go to any village and if you actually see a original banana plant, right? So I had eaten that in my childhood, but I don't see that anymore. So there you will actually find seeds, and those are actually big seeds, right? Those are big seeds, like big stones, and um, so black seeds. But the banana that we eat, none of them have seeds. That is because these are all modified, genetically modified, right? Not by genetic engineering, mostly through hybridization and other things. But what has been done is that these banana, they are triploid, meaning that they have 3 copies of each DNA. Okay, now you have done cell division and all those things. So if diploid, so we have 2 copies of our DNA. What will happen when you have 3 copies of DNA? How will meiosis work? So actually it doesn't work. When you have odd numbers, you get into a problem when you're doing meiosis. And seed is something that is involved for reproduction, right? So since there are 3 copies of DNA, these seeds don't grow. Okay, so when you eat banana, just at the center you will see some small black dots. Very small black dots you can see when you're eating it at the very center. So those are actually the seeds which have not grown because of this triploid DNA. Okay, which means that if you take this banana plant, it will you cannot use that seed to grow a banana plant. Okay.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, but at the same time, in our country, growing some genetically modified crops is banned, like BT brinjal.
Yes, so that is the issue, right? So again, I mean, their governments have to come up with clear-cut policies that why they are banning something and why they are not banning something else. Okay, and actually, it's not banned because of the science. These things get banned because of the economics that is involved in it. So the problem with this BT cotton is that I keep forgetting the name. So Montesaro or something like that. So there is this company, right? Now, these cottons, there was a huge problem with this particular cotton. Again, not the science part, but the economics part. So this company is the only one that will sell these seeds, right? You cannot buy these seeds from someone else. And when you are buying these seeds from this company, you can take loan. You have to take loan from this company only. So it was creating a huge debt cycle, right? So, and that created a big problem. So these are the things. I mean, it's when we look at these things, it's not always the science that is the problem, but the associated social and economic issues that make it problem. Right? Okay, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. So insulin, right? So how do we do this? So this is just a very brief or sort of a very generic description of what we do. I'll try to explain each of these steps in more details. So what we want to do is we have some gene of interest. If it is insulin, then the gene of interest will be the gene of insulin. Okay, so that is the gene of interest that we want to take and insert it. In some cases you delete it, but in this case we want to take the gene of insulin from us and insert it into bacteria. The way we do that is, instead of putting it in the genomic DNA of bacteria, we put it in a small circular DNA, which is called a plasmid. So we put this, our gene of interest, which is insulin, into a small circular DNA, which is called a plasmid, and we insert that plasmid into the bacteria. So this plasmid is distinct from the cell's chromosome. Okay, bacteria has its own chromosome, which encodes all the proteins, all the genes that it needs. It does not need insulin. So we are putting insulin in a different small circular DNA and we are forcefully inserting it into the bacteria. Okay, so we call it plasmid or we call it vector. So we use these terms interchangeably. Okay, so this has our gene of interest and it is inserted into the bacteria. So that process, the way how we inject the DNA into the bacteria is called transformation. Okay, so the transfer of the gene into the host cell. So in this case, the host cell is a bacteria. It can also be yeast. For example, I told you that Biocon uses yeast to make insulin. It can be other cells also. And you will see that we will use terms called clone. So clones are organisms which carry identical DNA or identical genes. So if you have two bacteria which have exactly the same DNA, they will be cloned. They will be called clones. Okay, so if you think of two people, if they have exactly same DNA, they will be clones of each other. So you, me, any one of us, none of us are clone of each other because our DNA will be slightly different. Okay, there will be many places where the DNA will be different. But if the DNAs are exactly same, then the two organisms will be called clones of each other. So what do we do? So let's say this is our DNA. And this is the small gene which codes for insulin. So in order to extract out that gene, what we will do is we will design up two primers, one for the 5' end, another for the 3' end, and then we will do PCR. So the PCR will amplify polymerase chain reaction that will amplify this gene. So you will get large number of copies. Okay, and then we will insert that into this plasmid. So this is the circular DNA. We will cut this DNA precisely using some molecular scissor. So you have to cut it, right? So we will cut it using some molecular scissor. We will see that there are enzymes which can do this very precisely. Then we will cut this PCR product again using the same scissor so that the ends of this matches the ends of this, and then we will insert it and then paste it. So we will do cutting with some molecular scissor, which is actually an enzyme. We will do pasting with another enzyme, which is called ligase. Okay, now you have your plasmid ready with our gene of interest, and then we will insert it into the bacteria. The way we do that is we mix this, a solution of this with a solution of this bacteria, and then we heat it to 42 degrees centigrade. Okay, not for long, for around 40-45 seconds. So in that time, this membrane becomes very fluid, and this DNA, it's very small, it can actually just slip through. Okay, and we will get some bacteria which has this plasmid inside it. Right, and then we will keep on growing this bacteria. We'll get a large amount of bacteria. So since the DNA is there, it will make our protein. So it will make a lot of insulin. Then we will crack open it and pass the whole solution through certain columns. These columns are specifically designed so that it will bind our insulin. Everything else will go out. So our insulin will be bound to it, and then we will release it from the column. So you will get your pure protein. Okay, it can be insulin, it can be anything. So whatever is your target protein, you will get highly purified form by running them through this type of columns. So what are the tools that we use? Okay, so it's like making a collage, right? So you need some DNA of interest, some color papers. You need your molecular scissor. So these molecular scissors are called restriction enzymes. So these are the ones which will cut the DNA at a very precise location. Okay, then you have to join them. So that joining we do using the ligase enzyme. So that's the molecular glue. Okay, and finally we put everything inside our bacteria. So the first ingredient that we need is the molecular scissor or restriction enzyme. So these enzymes, they are actually naturally found in bacteria. They had a certain function because what they do is they recognize certain type of DNA sequences and they will destroy those DNA sequences. So these are actually found in bacteria as their defense mechanism. But what we have done is we have repurposed them. Okay, so we have taken them and we are using it for our own advantage. So these enzymes, they recognize sequences like this and they will cut it. So if you look at the sequence, you will see that these are very interesting sequences. So these are what we call them as palindromic sequences. So palindromic means that if you read it from this end, so this will be the 5' end, this will be the 3' end. And for the complementary strand, this will be the 5' end, this will be the 3' end. So if you read it, 5' to 3', it is GAATTC. And in this case, 5' to 3' will be GAATTC. So it maintains the complementarity, but it is also palindromic. So it reads the same from both ends, but in different strands. 5' to 3' and 5' to 3', it will read exactly the same sequence. Okay, so here also CCC, GGG, here CCC, GGG. Right. So these restriction enzymes, they identify such symmetric sequences. Okay, one enzyme will only identify one sequence. So for this sequence, you will get one enzyme. For this sequence, you will get another enzyme. So you can have similar palindromic sequences and you will have a different enzyme for that. Okay, so at this point of time, I think we have an arsenal of around 40 different restriction enzymes. Right. And you can see that they will cut at different places. So one way of cutting it is like this, right at the center, straight. So this is called blunt ends. So you see that this will separate out and this will separate out. So there is blunt. No, nothing is hanging out or sticking out. Some enzymes will cut like this. So between this GA and between this GA. So when this is cut, this strand, the lower strand will have these 4 extra bases hanging out. And in this part, this upper strand will have these 4 extra bases hanging out. Right. So this is called a sticky end cutting, and this is a blunt end cutting. Okay. So now we have basically identified several such restriction enzymes, and those are used for various purposes. So this is what is done. You have your PCR product. You can cut those PCR product using your restriction enzyme of choice. So when we design our primers, we actually, at the end of the primers, we encode these restriction sites so that we can use a particular restriction enzyme to cut it at the ends. So it turns out that these restriction enzymes, if it's a 6 base cutter, then the chances of finding that sequence will be very less. Right. So we can actually do this very simple math, that if a particular restriction enzyme identifies 6 nucleotide sequence, then what is the chance of finding that 6 nucleotide sequence? Okay, it will be 1 in 4,000. So there are 6 sites. Every site can be A, T, G, or C. So there is 1/4 probability of finding that particular nucleotide in the first position. Similarly, 1/4 for the second position and so on. So you get 1/4 to the power 6. So that is roughly 1 site in 4,000 base pairs. Now the size of these plasmids are around 5,000 base pairs. Okay, so it turns out that these plasmids will have only one restriction site. And we can use this molecular scissor to precisely cut there. Okay. So that's the cutting part. And then we use another enzyme called ligase to join 2 pieces. So you have your plasmid which you have cut open using a restriction enzyme. You have your PCR product. Now you want to join them together. To do that, we use ligase. So where have you heard of this enzyme before? Ligase.
Which fills the gaps of the primers.
It fixes the
Gaps formed by adding primers in
yes.
DNA
In which-
replication.
Right. So in DNA replication, correct. So in DNA replication, we actually talked about ligase. So there was this gaps, especially if you think about the complementary strand where you have the Okazaki fragments, right? So they have to be joined by the ligase. So it's exactly the same enzyme, right? We use that ligase, and to seal that gap, you need a phosphate group, and that phosphate is supplied by the ATP. So it needs ATP. Okay, the enzyme by itself will not be sufficient. You have to add a little bit of ATP, and then it can covalently link these two bases. So now you have this AA, so you have this continuous chain here and a continuous chain there. Okay. The third one is the plasmid. This is where we are inserting the gene of interest. So this plasmid turns out to be not a random circular DNA. Okay, so this is a very precisely designed circular DNA. It has several properties, right? People have actually designed it, and now they are commercially available in different flavors. So this is one of the simplest one called PUC19. Okay, there are like thousands of different such vectors available now. One of the important features is that they are able to self-replicate, meaning that inside the cell, when the cell is dividing from one cell to another cell, okay, these plasmids will also have to multiply. So one bacteria becomes two, two becomes four, right? So, but if the plasmids are not replicating like the DNA, then you will not have this plasmid in the newly synthesized cells, right? So they have a self origin of replication, so that these plasmids will also be replicated. Then you have this cloning site. So you see this HIND3, BAMH1, EcoR1, these are restriction enzymes. Okay, so the corresponding site where these restriction enzymes will cut are designed here. So this cloning site actually will have a lot more restriction sites. Okay, maybe around 20 different restriction sites, all put together right next to each other. And you will not find them anywhere else in the DNA. They are only designed here. So this is where you want to insert the gene. So if I want to make insulin, my insulin gene will be inserted here. So I will use, let's say, HIND3 and BAMH1 to cut it. I will have my PCR product of insulin. I will cut one side with HIND3, the other side with BAMH1, and then it will come and fit here. I will use ligase to seal the gaps. Now I will have this circular DNA. Okay. So all of that is fine. I have made this. Then I will insert it into the bacteria. Now comes a problem. So suppose I have 1000 bacteria. Okay. So I have a solution of 1000 bacteria and I have my DNA. Let's say 10,000 molecules of DNA. I heat it. Right. This DNA I said is a small molecule, but it's not very small. Okay. So out of this 1000 bacteria, maybe 2 will take up the DNA. 998 will not. But everything is present in the solution. How will I pick out those 2 bacteria which have this DNA, which have this circular plasmid, and remove the remaining 998? Okay, so everything is in solution. It's bacteria, it's very small, so it's almost an impossible task. To do that, what we do is we use a selectable marker. Okay, so this part, you see, this is actually another gene. Okay, it encodes for another enzyme, which when produced, so this enzyme will destroy an antibiotic called ampicillin. Okay, so what are antibiotics? Antibiotics are something that kills bacteria. So what I will do is I have this 1,000 bacteria in my solution, right? So I will take that 1,000 bacteria and I will add it to a particular plate which has ampicillin in it. So ampicillin will kill all the bacteria. Okay, except the two which have this plasmid, because those bacteria will produce this enzyme and this enzyme will kill all the ampicillin that is coming close to the bacteria. Okay, any ampicillin that comes close to that particular bacteria, they will be killed by that enzyme, destroyed by the enzyme. So it destroys the ampicillin and saves the bacteria. But all other bacteria which have not taken up this plasmid, they don't have that protection, so they will die. So after some time, all the bacteria will die. Only these two will live, and they will of course multiply. Okay, so after some time, you will have only bacteria, these bacteria, which have taken up the plasmid. So using this selectable marker, we can very easily select this type of bacteria which have taken up our plasmid. Okay, so I keep talking about bacteria because that is the simplest thing to use, but it is not necessary that you will insert this plasmid into a bacteria only. Okay, it can be inserted into yeast also. So bacteria is prokaryote, yeast is eukaryote, but single celled. Okay, single celled eukaryote. Now, since it's an eukaryote, it has more complicated machinery, and it turns out that several proteins which are not properly synthesized in bacteria, you will have to grow them in yeast. So one example is that insulin is grown in yeast by Biocon. If there are more complicated proteins which are also not growing well in yeast, then people try plant cells or mammalian cells. Okay, so all these different types of cells are used to grow, to produce whatever we need. But of course, the difficulty increases in this direction. This is the easiest to handle, and these are the most difficult to grow. Okay. Any question up to this point?
Sir,
Yes.
are those restriction sites already present in the LAC-Z gene, or like we like modify the LAC-Z
Oh,
gene?
so sorry. This LAC-Z gene is actually, it ends here. So this picture is little misleading. So yeah, you are right. LAC-Z gene, it ends somewhere here. After that will be the cloning site. Okay. Now the purpose of this LAC-Z gene is I have not talked about that, right? What this LAC-Z gene? So in transcription we have talked about LAC-Z, right? So it is the same promoter. It's not the gene, it's the promoter. So that promoter is used here because we want to trigger the expression of protein under certain conditions. So to do that triggering, this particular promoter is used. So don't worry too much about this LAC-Z. Okay. For this class, normally we teach it at a in the recombinant DNA technology course, but for this course, let's not worry about LAC-Z. Anything else? Okay, so this is just a bit more zoomed in view of that. So again, this is the plasmid, right? This is the cloning site, and these are different restriction enzymes which are listed. That's the selectable marker. So this is what we do. Your gene fragment which you get by PCR, you insert it. You have your plasmid, you insert that into the bacteria. The one which has not taken up the plasmid will die off because ampicillin will kill it, but those E. coli cells which have taken up the plasmid will survive, and then they will multiply, and from here you will break open the cells and purify them. Okay, so that is what is done for insulin also, but in this case it is made in a slightly different manner. So in our body, what happens is insulin is produced as a long polypeptide chain with as a pre-proinsulin. The signal peptide goes out, then the C chain goes out, so that A and B chains are held together by disulfide linkages. But when we are making it in the industry, this A chain and the B chain, the A chain and the B chain, they are cloned separately. Okay, they are grown separately and purified separately. So you have this B chain and you have this A chain. They are separate. Okay, so you have purified B chain and purified A chain. Now you put them together and you oxidize them so that these disulfide linkages are formed. Okay, but again, this is tricky because you can have B chain connected to B chain, A chain connected to A chain, and A chain connected to B chain. So then you will have to purify that so that you remove the BB, AA, and you only select AB. That we can do based on the size. Okay, and now you have your pure insulin. Okay, so that part of genetic engineering involved basically manipulating at the level of DNA and adding certain characteristics or trying to make proteins. Okay, some important commercially important proteins, we are making it in bacteria. So this is something very common. A lot of such proteins are being made in bacteria now. Okay, another very important aspect of genetic engineering is cloning or cloning of whole animals. Right, so you want to clone a particular animal. Suppose there is a horse. It's a very famous horse. It has won a lot of derby, right? So you want to clone that horse because there is no guarantee that the offspring of that horse will be equally good, right? So you can actually use one of these techniques to create an exact clone of the same horse so that you can keep winning your races. Like, and that this is not a random example. People actually do that, right? There are cows which are highly milk producing, so you want to keep genetic makeup. So people use whole animal cloning to produce more such animals. So before I go into the actual process, this is just a small recapitulation. This is already covered in cell division class. Hopefully you remember, but I'll just quickly go through it. So if you think animals, okay, higher organisms, in our case, DNA is split into different fragments, right? In case of bacteria, there is only one DNA, which is a circular chromosome. But in our case, the DNA is linear and it is broken into 23 pieces, right? And each piece comes in pairs. So there are 2 chromosome 1s, 2 chromosome 2, 2 chromosome 3, so on and so forth. So this is the largest one and 23 is the smallest one. Sorry, 22 is the smallest one. The 23rd one is unique because that is the one where the 2 pairs are not identical. They are actually different. Okay. So in case of female, both will be X chromosome, and in case of males, one will be X, the other one will be Y. So this is the one that determines the sex of a particular person. Okay, so we are diploid because we have 2 sets of each chromosome. Now one set comes from each of our parents. So one set will come from the father, the other set will come from the mother. And that is what happens during fertilization, right? So one set of DNA, so 23 chromosomes will come from the father and 23 chromosomes will come from the mother, so that now you will have two sets of each chromosome, and that is the cell. So this egg plus this sperm, they combine to form this cell, and this is the first cell. So basically life starts as a single cell. Okay. And then we saw that this single cell will divide into two cells will divide into four into 8, so on and so forth. And then the whole organism will develop, right? So again, if you remember from those lectures, when the cell divides 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, up to that stage, all the cells are almost identical. Okay. Which means that if you split those cells, you can still grow the whole organism. And that is what is done in embryo splitting. So when you are at this 16, let's say 8 or 16 cell stage, so let's say your cells, at that point, you split those cells into two parts, 8 cells and 8 cells, right? And then you insert those cells into two animals. So in this case, it is being done using sheep. So you insert those 8 cells into one sheep and another set of 8 cells into another sheep. They will give birth to two baby sheep, and these two baby sheep will be exactly identical. Even though they are getting born from two different mothers, they will be clones of each other. They will be exactly identical of each other, right? So what is done? Eggs are collected and sperms are collected and they are fertilized in vitro. So this is called IVF, in vitro fertilization, right? So nowadays, if you go to any clinic, there are many clinics which will have these boards up, IVF, right? So people who are having difficulty in getting child, they can actually go for in vitro fertilization. So this has become very common these days. So the colloquial term that we know this is the test tube baby, right? So when we say that, okay, test tube baby, that in India, I think that was in the early 1980s, the first test tube baby was born. That is nothing but in vitro fertilization. So in that case, what is done is fertilization is done in outside, and then once they divide into 2 or 4 cells, that is inserted into the mother and the babies. Then the normal process takes over, right? But the fertilization is done outside. In this particular case, since we want to produce more animals, what is done is after in vitro fertilization, the embryo is allowed to grow to 8 to 16 cells. Then they are split into 2 parts or maybe 3 parts, and then inserted into different carrier or surrogate mothers, where they will grow into complete animals, and those animals will be exact replica of each other. So they will not be the same as the mother. They will be same as each other. Okay. The other technique is called nuclear transfer. So in this case, what is done is, suppose this is a donor sheep, right? So you take cell from the donor sheep, any cell, not sperm or egg, but some other cell, some somatic cell, right? Then from that cell, you remove the nucleus. So you take the nucleus and you throw this remaining of the cell. This is another sheep. From this sheep, so this is a female. From this sheep, you take an egg. You take out its nucleus too. So you have the empty egg. You take this nucleus, which you had collected from this ship, you take this nucleus and you put it into this egg, which you have collected from this ship. So this nucleus goes into this egg. And then you give it a little electric shock, it will start dividing. Okay. This will start dividing when it is again, it has divided into 4 or 8 cells. You insert all of these into a third ship. So this was ship 1, this was ship 2, this is 3. So you insert it into a surrogate mother. The baby sheep will be born from this sheep. So now my question is, this baby sheep which is born, this sheep will be identical to this sheep 3 or this sheep 2 or this sheep 1.
Sheep 1.
Why?
Because the nucleus has the genetic material.
So the nucleus has the genetic material. It means that the DNA that this sheep has will be exactly the same as the DNA that this sheep has, right? So this sheep will be a clone of this donor sheep, right? Now my question is that what is the difference between this method and the previous method? So in this method, you see that this baby sheep is exactly the same clone of this adult sheep, right? But in the previous method, this baby sheep is not identical to the mother sheep from which the egg was collected, or the father sheep from which the sperm was collected, or the surrogate mother sheep. So there also you have one sheep which supplied the sperm, one sheep which supplied the egg, and one sheep in which it was implanted. These newborn sheep are not identical to any of these three. Why that is the case?
Because DNA is modified in the process of meiosis.
DNA is modified in the process of meiosis. Yes. So when you take the sperm, the DNA in that particular sperm will be slightly different from the actual sheep producing that. Similarly, the DNA in the egg will be slightly different from the one produced by the sheep which is producing the egg, right? And then when they recombine, every gene will have 2 copies. One will come from the father, other one will come from the mother, right? Now, depending on which one is dominant, that particular gene, its properties will be expressed. Okay, and it turns out that roughly it is 50-50. So that is why you will see that a kid will have some features from father, some features from mother, which means that the kid, you can tell that this kid belongs to these parents, but that kid will also be unique. Right, so that is exactly what happens. So genetically, these ships will be unique. They will be different from the 2 donor ships, the male and the female, and it will also be different from the surrogate mother because no DNA transfer happens here. Okay, but they will be exactly same as each other because no change in DNA happens during mitosis. So when this division happens, 1 cell to 2 cell, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, you are getting mitosis. No change in the DNA is happening. So they will be exactly the same. In this case, it is very similar, but both the DNA, both copies of the DNA have come from this person, from this sheep, right? So that is why this newborn sheep will be an exact copy of this older sheep, right? So that's a clone of this. And we have seen examples of that in many cases. Okay. So this is one very famous example that I don't remember which one was this. This was the 5th or the 6th movie of Star Wars. So Attack of Clones or the Clone Wars, right? So all this clone army was created from this one person who was the bounty hunter, right? So you can imagine that this clone army was actually created by nuclear transfer.
Sir, sir, Hmm. Sir.
Yes, please go ahead. I cannot hear you.
Oh, okay. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, sir. Sir, I asked that. I mean, where in this process? I mean, the nuclear transfer. Where is the sperm? I mean, it is just from the egg cell. Everything is
Yes.
going on. But where is
So
the
you are
sperm?
not using the sperm. Okay. You are not using the sperm. You are only using the egg. Again, you are not using the DNA of the egg. You are using the egg because it has all the nutrients and everything that the cell needs to divide. Okay. So we are getting the nucleus from a somatic cell, which means that it is a diploid cell. If you take sperm, it has only one copy of DNA, right? But if we take, let's say, the skin cell, it will have two copies of each DNA. And that is what you need at the end. So after fertilization, what happens? One copy comes from father, one copy comes from mother. But we are not doing that. We are getting both copies from the same person, right? So you are not using sperm. And you are not using the DNA of the egg also because it has only one copy. So we have thrown that out. We are only using the rest of the egg because it has all the nutrients, everything that is needed to divide. Egg cells are actually very big, right? Then you have this, you give some electric shock to induce it to start dividing, and then you transplant it into the surrogate mother and get the clone.
Sir, I mean, here another question is that can we do it with, I mean, two sheep? Like, if suppose the first sheep is a female and it has some egg, and from that egg we remove the nucleus and replace the nucleus from the same sheep, I mean, tissue of the same sheep, and then do other things. So, can we do that?
Yes, theoretically you can do that. Yes. So basically what you're saying is you take the egg of this sheep, you throw out its nucleus. So you have this. Now you take the DNA from some other part of this sheep, right?
Yes, sir.
And insert it so that you actually end up with this diploid cell. And then, yeah, in principle, it should work. There is no problem in there.
Okay, sir.
Yes. So the idea is that it has to be a diploid. So two copies are coming from the same animal. So it has to be a diploid cell, a somatic cell. Yes. So you're right. That should work. Okay. Anything else?
No, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. So yeah, I was just giving you some movie reference, right? So this you can imagine that must have been done by the same nuclear transfer, right? And also these two examples, right? So this is a clone of this, so it has to be nuclear transfer. This is a clone of this, so it has to be a nuclear transfer. So this is a very popular concept with movies, right? And they don't tell you how they did that, but now we know. So the first clone mammal was done in 1996, and she was named as Dolly. So we have already seen the process, right? So you take this egg cell, enucleation, remove the nucleus. You take the nucleus from another cell, another sheep, right? And then you let it divide, transplant it into a surrogate mother, and then what you get is the baby, which is exactly the same as this donor. So that was the nuclear transfer method that was used to create the clone. And then after that, I mean, some people who have a lot of money can do that commercially also. So this particular cat, she was very fond of her cat. The cat was about to die. She wanted to make that cat live longer. So what scientists in Texas A&M did was she paid a lot of money. They cloned the cat, right? And produced exactly the same cat, and she was very happy. So that was called the another movie reference that I wanted to show you, because this is something that you will see why I'm showing you this. So I don't know how many of you have seen this movie. It's called Gattaca, Gattaca. Anyone has seen this movie? Yeah, that's okay. No one has seen this. So that is highly recommended, right? So it has very good actors. The premise of this movie, huh? You have seen it? Okay. So what they show in this movie is that this is some, it's of course a science fiction. So in this future, babies are not born through the natural process, right? What they are done is they are actually genetically engineered. So you can select for genes, and if you want your child to grow up as a doctor, you can get that done, so that in the laboratory they will express the correct genes and your child will be a doctor. If you want your child to be a scientist, you will get that. If you pay more money, your child will be a politician and can be the leader of the country. So you can get all this kind of things, right? So what they showed basically is that you can select for certain traits by modifying the DNA of a unborn child. But you can understand that if someone wants to do that, there is a lot of ethics that comes into the picture, and that type of research is actually banned. So we cannot do that type of research for obvious reasons. But that has not stopped people from doing it, right? So these are two cloned primates. So these were cloned in 2017. Okay, so these primates, their DNA was actually engineered to remove certain traits from their DNA. Okay, so that was in November 2017, and 2 years later, in December 2019, no, I think it's December 2018. So 1 year later, the same thing was done in human babies also. Okay, so these are two girls named Lulu and Nana, right? So these are their nicknames, though actual names were not released. So these two girls were born in December 2018, where their DNA was actually genetically engineered. Okay, and this was done in Hong Kong. It's not possible to do it in any other places, but I mean, people can get away with such things in China, right? So then there has been a lot of uproar that it is unethical and all that. I have not seen this paper come out yet. So this was in 2018. There was no paper till 2019. And then in 2020, we had the pandemic. So still, there is no information about what exactly was done. It was, of course, not ethical, but there is no news on how these kids are, whether it was successful and or not, things like that, right? So that is where maybe science is heading. I don't know, maybe Gattaca, what was shown in that movie, maybe in 50 years time, that might be true, right? One of the ways that can be done is through a particular method called CRISPR, right? And CRISPR was in news again last year because these two women, so there were many people who were involved in it, but these are the two women scientists who were actually recognized for the discovery of CRISPR last year. So CRISPR is one of the methods which can be used to target genetic engineering or gene editing. So it's not engineering, we call it editing in a particular organism. Okay. So that is that. I will stop here. Let me know if you have any questions. So again, once again, for students who have joined later, so this is the last class of this course for this semester. Next Wednesday, that is 7th, we will have exam on whatever has been covered till now, excluding what was included in the first exam. So cell and developmental biology, cell cycle, neurobiology, immune system, and genetic engineering. All of this will be in the exam next week.
Sir, and the pattern of the exam will be similar like
Same
MCQs.
like the first one. Yes, MCQ, no negative marking, and make sure that you submit your submit your exam on time, right? Because if you
Yes,
don't
yes.
submit your exam on time, it will not be recorded.
Will there be any compensation for the people who missed the first exam?
I will send out an email. So we will see how many people have missed the first exam. Based on that, we will try to decide something.
Sir, at what time is the test next week?
I don't think did we send out any email? Maybe
No,
not.
sir.
So yeah, so we will send out an email. Normally between 2 to 4. So I'm not sure whether it will be 2 to 3 or 2:30 to 3:30. So that we will decide and send out